You will fail today, not because you're weak, but because you're human. And the man who understood this better than anyone ruled an empire while sitting alone each morning, reminding himself of his own insignificance. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king of Rome, didn't begin his days with affirmations of greatness. He began them by confronting the worst of human nature, starting with his own. This wasn't pessimism. This was preparation. And in the next few minutes, you'll discover why the morning ritual of history's most powerful Stoic might be the most practical psychological tool you've never used. Marcus Aurelius woke before dawn in a world vastly different from ours, yet his mind wrestled with forces we know intimately. The temptation to remain comfortable, the fear of wasted time, the quiet dread that we're not living as we should. His response wasn't to deny these feelings. It was to sit with them deliberately, to name them, to strip them of their power through clear sight. He called this practice premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils, though that translation makes it sound darker than it was. What he actually did each morning was run a mental simulation of reality, a kind of philosophical rehearsal for the day ahead. He would sit and think, "Today, I will meet people who are ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, envious. I will face frustration. I will be misunderstood. I will encounter obstacles I did not plan for." And here's the shift. By expecting these things, he wasn't inviting suffering. He was removing the sting of surprise. We suffer most not from events themselves, but from the gap between what we expect and what occurs. We walk into our days with an unspoken assumption that things should go smoothly, that people should be reasonable, that our plans should unfold as designed. And when they don't, we feel betrayed by reality itself. Marcus knew this, so he closed that gap before breakfast. He didn't hope for a perfect day. He prepared for a human one. This is not cynicism. This is clarity. And clarity is the beginning of calm. But let's go deeper. Why did a man with absolute power, a man who commanded legions and shaped the fate of millions, feel the need to remind himself each morning that he was not special? Because he understood something we've forgotten. Power is not immunity. Influence is not importance. Success is not wisdom. The higher you rise in the world's eyes, the easier it is to lose sight of what you actually control, which is almost nothing beyond your own responses. Marcus wrote in his private journal, the text we now call Meditations, that the universe doesn't care about your rank, your titles, or your plans. Death comes for emperors and slaves alike. Pain visits the palace as readily as the prison. And if you tie your peace to external outcomes, you'll never have peace at all. Consider how we live now. We wake and immediately reach for our phones, filling our minds with the urgency of others, before we've even clarified our own intentions. We scroll through curated perfection and feel the creep of inadequacy. We check our notifications, as if they contain something that will finally make us whole. And we carry this reactive posture into every hour that follows, lurching from stimulus to stimulus, never quite present, never quite calm. Marcus would have seen this clearly. He would have recognized it as the opposite of freedom. Because freedom, in the Stoic sense, isn't the absence of obligations. It's the presence of inner direction. It's deciding, before the world makes demands, who you intend to be today. Here's the turn. Most people think morning routines are about productivity, about optimizing performance, about getting an edge. But Marcus wasn't trying to be more efficient. He was trying to be more human. His morning practice wasn't a life hack. It was a confrontation with truth. He didn't ask himself how to achieve more. He asked himself how to endure wisely, how to respond justly, how to remain decent when the world gave him every excuse not to be. And this is where modern self-improvement literature misses the mark entirely. We're obsessed with becoming exceptional. The Stoics were obsessed with remaining sane. Let's bring this into your life. Imagine you wake tomorrow, and instead of checking your inbox or your feed, you sit quietly for 5 minutes and think, what will test me today? Not in a fearful way, but in a factual way. Maybe it's a difficult conversation you've been avoiding. Maybe it's the monotony of tasks that feel beneath you. Maybe it's the weight of responsibility you didn't ask for but can't escape. Now imagine you name those things clearly, without drama, and you say to yourself, I expected this. This is part of being alive. I'm ready. What changes? Everything. Because now you're not reacting to life. You're meeting it. Marcus also did something else each morning that we've almost entirely lost. He practiced gratitude, but not the shallow kind we see on Instagram. He didn't list superficial blessings. He gave thanks for the people who had taught him virtue, who had modeled patience, courage, humility. He remembered his teachers, his family, those who had shaped his character. This wasn't sentimentality. It was recognition. He understood that none of us becomes wise alone. We're shaped by every hard conversation, every person who challenged us, every moment we were forced to choose between comfort and truth. And by recalling those people each morning, he reminded himself that his character was not his achievement. It was a gift, fragile and requiring constant maintenance. So here's a quiet invitation. If what you're hearing resonates, if you sense there's something here worth returning to, consider subscribing to this channel. Not because you need more content, but because these ideas deserve a place in your awareness, a rhythm in your thinking. And in the comments, share one thing you'd want to remind yourself of each morning. Not what you hope will happen. What you need to remember is true. Let's build something thoughtful together. Now, we arrive at the harder question. If Marcus Aurelius, with all his wisdom and discipline, still needed to remind himself each morning of basic truths, what does that tell us about the nature of wisdom itself? It tells us this. Wisdom is not a permanent state. It's a practice. You don't achieve it and then rest. You return to it again and again, because the mind is not a vault. It's a garden. And gardens, left untended, grow wild. The Stoics knew that clarity fades, that resolve weakens, that we forget what we know in the face of immediate emotion. So they built their philosophy not as a monument, but as a daily discipline. They didn't write to be remembered. They wrote to be repeated. This is why Marcus didn't write for publication. His meditations were never meant to be read by us. They were notes to himself, reminders scrawled during military campaigns, late at night, in moments of doubt or exhaustion. He was coaching himself, the way an athlete returns to fundamentals. And the fundamentals for him were simple, but severe. You are going to die, so act accordingly. You cannot control outcomes, so focus on character. Others will misunderstand you, so don't depend on their approval. Pleasure fades, pain passes, reputation is smoke. What remains is how you conducted yourself, when no one was watching and nothing was guaranteed. Let's sit with that last idea. How you conduct yourself when no one is watching. In our age of constant visibility, of personal brands and curated selves, this concept feels almost quaint. We're encouraged to document everything, to perform our lives for an audience, to measure our worth by engagement metrics. But Marcus lived in a different moral economy. He believed that the most important actions were the ones no one would ever applaud. The patience you show when you're tired. The honesty you maintain when a lie would be easier. The restraint you exercise when you have the power to lash out. These are the moments that define you, not because they're seen, but because they shape the architecture of your soul. And here's the reversal. We think of self-discipline as restriction, as denying ourselves what we want. But for the Stoics, discipline was liberation. Every time you chose reason over impulse, principle over convenience, you became a little more free. Because freedom isn't doing whatever you feel like. It's becoming the kind of person whose feelings align with their values. It's training your desires so they stop tyrannizing you. Marcus understood that the undisciplined mind is a slave to every passing mood, every external pressure, every fleeting want. But the disciplined mind, the mind that has been shaped through daily practice, experiences something rare, self-trust. Think about how little self-trust most of us have. We make promises to ourselves and break them. We set intentions and abandon them by noon. We know what we should do, but we do something else. And then we wonder why we feel fragmented, anxious, disconnected from our own lives. Marcus would say this is because we haven't made a practice of return. We haven't built the habit of coming back each morning, to what we actually believe. We're living reactively, carried along by forces we never examine. And a life lived that way, no matter how successful it appears, will always feel hollow. So what did Marcus do after his morning meditation? He went into the world and tried to live what he'd rehearsed. And he failed constantly. He lost his temper. He felt jealous, petty, tired. He made mistakes in judgment. He was human. But here's what mattered. He didn't pretend those failures didn't happen. He didn't justify them. He noted them, examined them, and tried to do better the next time. This is the Stoic method. Not perfection, but honest iteration. Not becoming invincible, but becoming more aware. And awareness, sustained over years, becomes wisdom. There's a modern parallel here worth considering. In our therapeutic culture, we talk constantly about self-care, about protecting our mental health, about setting boundaries. All of this is valuable. But Marcus would push further. He'd ask, what are you protecting yourself for? Is it so you can be more comfortable? Or so you can be more useful? Is it so you can avoid difficulty? Or so you can face difficulty with more strength? The Stoic position is that discomfort is not the enemy. Meaninglessness is. Pain is not the problem. Wasted pain is. Suffering in itself teaches nothing. But suffering examined, suffering contextualized, suffering met with reason and courage, that becomes the forge of character. And this brings us to the final layer of Marcus's morning practice. After confronting the challenges ahead, after remembering his teachers, after reminding himself of his mortality, he would set an intention. Not a goal in the external sense, but an internal commitment. Today, I will be patient. Today, I will listen before I speak. Today, I will not be disturbed by things outside my control. These weren't affirmations. They were commands he gave himself, a kind of inner legislation. And throughout the day, when he failed to live up to them, he'd notice, adjust, and try again. This is the rhythm of Stoic life. Set the standard. Fall short. Return. Set it again. Now, imagine you adopted this practice. Not perfectly, not dramatically, but sincerely. Imagine you spent 5 minutes each morning preparing your mind the way you prepare your body. You'd think, what challenges will I face? What do I actually control? Who do I want to be today, regardless of what happens? And then you'd go live your life, and you'd fail in 100 small ways, but you'd notice, because you'd set the standard in advance. And noticing is where change begins. Not in motivation, not in inspiration, but in the quiet accumulation of moments when you see yourself clearly and choose differently. The deepest gift Marcus offers us is not a technique. It's a perspective. He shows us that life is not a problem to be solved. It's a condition to be met with dignity. The universe is indifferent. Events are neutral. What gives them meaning is our response. And our response is shaped not in the moment of crisis, but in the hundreds of small moments before it, when we were alone with our thoughts, deciding who we would become. This is why his morning practice mattered so much. It wasn't preparation for a specific challenge. It was preparation for being human in a world that constantly tests us. So here's what you carry forward. Not a formula, not a promise of ease, but a way of standing in your own life. Each morning, before the world rushes in, take a breath and remember, you are mortal, and therefore your time is precious. You are limited, and therefore your choices matter. You will face difficulty, and therefore your character will be revealed. And in that revelation, in that honest encounter with who you are and who you're becoming, you'll find something the world can't give you and can't take away. You'll find the quiet strength that comes from knowing you're living as you intended. Not perfectly, just honestly. And in the end, that's all any of us can do. Marcus Aurelius knew this 2,000 years ago, ruling the world by day and questioning himself by night. His wisdom didn't make him powerful. His power gave him the chance to practice wisdom. And that practice, that daily return to truth, is available to you. Not someday, this morning, right now. The question isn't whether you'll face adversity today. You will. The question is whether you'll meet it as a stranger or as something you've already greeted in the quiet of your own mind. Marcus chose the latter. And that choice, renewed each dawn, made all the difference.